Hello and welcome to Take 5. Thank you for making us a part of your afternoon. I'm Millicent Olivares. But next, Valley Marine turned author David Mendoza III is right here in our studios. He was published several children's books and has even started his own publishing company. He's joining us for our Empowering the RGB segment. Next, we'll be right back. The retired federal officer turned author recently published his first self-help book for adults. But David Mendoza III has already published several children's books. He is joining us now to talk more about his life and career. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
And you've also brought some special guests here, I see?
Yes, there's my sons, Jeremiah and DJ.
Thank you all so much for joining us. So David, let's get into it. You have had such an interesting career even before you became an author. Can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah, sure. So right after high school, I joined the Marines, and actually it was right during Desert Storm. Wow. So yeah, so I did my 4 years, and then after that, I joined a federal service, law enforcement service, and I did my 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I was in federal law enforcement. I was a canine handler, and halfway through. During that time, I had had a challenging time. Well, we all have challenging times, but right. Especially, because of the military, I have PTSD and anxiety. So I dealt with that heavily, and it was during that time that and you'll find it in my book. It's in chapter 3. It's called Highway 44. That's where I came to my crossroads. So from there, and honestly, the way I became an author was I used to tell bedtime stories to these guys when they were little, and actually this book has those bedtime stories.
Wow.
But my wife had always told me, you should write a book. They're so good, you should write a book. I'm like, no, me never, I'm not gonna write a book. But they were bedtime stories mixed with scripture. So they're kind of like devotionals. And and I would tell them the story, and they didn't even know it was devotionals, but they enjoyed them so much, because I would bring these stories during their challenging times. For example, if they're facing issues that children deal with, whether bullying or just any other type of issue, and that's the way I would create a story with Floppy and Hoppy, my two characters that I made up, and like I said, my wife's the one that said, you know what, you should at least keep notes. Maybe one of these days, you can share these stories with others. And so it didn't, and that was several years ago. Once I retired, I would tell stories to my younger one, and I noticed my older one was still listening. Wow. So that's when I said, you know what, maybe there is something there.
Right.
And honestly, through prayer, God put in my heart to share these stories. So we began about a little less than a year ago.
Wow.
I began writing that first book, and this is our first book, Hoppy and Floppy.
Okay.
And actually, he's the illustrator behind that.
Amazing.
Yeah, Jeremiah's the illustrator.
Full of talent, the family.
Yes,
I love that.
Yes,
and you've got quite a few as well
we do.
here.
And the thing about these books is that they're all faith-based. Every single one of them is faith-based, and they all have a purpose. They're not just stories. They're actually a story. I like to say story with a purpose.
Right.
For example, that one right there is an anti-bully one.
Oh.
Yeah. And then I have one that helps children conquer fear.
Got it.
You see?
Wow.
So all these, this is my latest books. This one here is on my old canine Rudy.
Okay.
I was a canine handler, and but it's stories about him being a service dog, and it teaches children the difference between a detection dog and a patrol dog.
Wow.
Yeah, and it has a little training manual that teaches the kids how to train their puppies.
Wow, that's so helpful books, and that's exactly what you're also focusing on as of recent.
Exactly.
This is now your self-help book that you've put out. What can you tell us about this new
book
one?
right here, like I mentioned, it is not, some people might see it as a memoir, but it's more than that, because I don't only share my experiences when I was in the Marine Corps or in federal law enforcement, but as a law enforcement officer, I was also a chaplain and a peer support member. So I got a lot from my experience on being a chaplain and a peer support member. There's a lot of stories on that, that, I went through this, and this would help me out. And so, once I came to my crossroads, like I mentioned, and, I started, actually, it was a calling. It was a calling in my life. And God was calling me, and at that point, like I said, I was in a dark place.
Right.
But this book is meant to share with people that there is hope, that there is encouragement. I know some
adults, it's absolutely inspiring. Thank you so much for being
Yes.
here. Boys, thank you for joining your dad. I know you guys are very proud of him, and we are too. Thank you.
Yes.
And guys, if you want any more information on David and his books, you can, of course, visit him on his Instagram as well as his Facebook page. And from all of us here at Take 5, we, of course, want to thank David for his service.